She was 18 years old. No home, no savings, no one waiting for her. Just an old backpack, a quiet heart, and $12 folded carefully into her coat pocket. Her name was Jessica, and this is the story of how she found a future inside a place that everyone else had forgotten. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Jessica walked out of the last foster home she would ever know. The door closed behind her with a soft click. It wasn't loud, but it was final. For 5 years, she had moved from house to house. Some were kind, some were cold, but none of them had ever felt like hers. Now she was legally an adult, which meant, in the simplest and hardest way, that she was on her own. The sky above the small Oregon town was gray. Early spring. A cold wind moved through the streets, carrying the smell of rain. Jessica pulled her jacket tighter and looked at the road ahead. She had no plan, no destination, just $28 and a faded photograph of a woman she barely remembered, her grandmother. Just before she left, a tired social worker had handed her a thin envelope. "This came from an old law office," the woman had said. "It belongs to you now." Jessica opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a short legal letter and a hand-drawn map. The map led to a small piece of land in the mountains. At the bottom of the letter, one sentence stood out. "To claim this property, you only need to pay $12 in unpaid taxes." $12. She read it again. It sounded impossible. Land didn't cost $12. A sandwich at a gas station cost almost that much, which meant either the letter was a mistake or the property was so worthless that no one else wanted it. Jessica looked at the money in her pocket. $28. That was everything. $12 felt like a lot when you had almost nothing, but it also felt like a door. And sometimes, when you have nothing left, even a strange and uncertain door feels worth opening. She folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and made her choice. The next morning, she spent $10 on a bus ticket heading east toward the mountains. The ride took almost 4 hours. The bus wound through pine forests and small towns, where old buildings leaned tiredly toward the right. Jessica sat by the window the whole time, the envelope resting in her lap. The farther they traveled, the quieter the world became. The city disappeared. Then the suburbs. Then even the small towns grew farther apart. Soon there was only trees, mountains, and long empty roads. She didn't talk to anyone. No one talked to her. And for the first time in years, that felt like freedom. The town at the end of the bus road was tiny, a single main street, a diner with a flickering sign, a hardware store that smelled of wood and oil, and a small brick building with a brass sign that read Peterson and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Inside, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes greeted her. Her name was Mrs. Peterson. She looked at Jessica's backpack, her worn boots, her young face. She didn't ask painful questions. She simply opened a folder and spread the papers across her desk. "Your grandmother purchased this land nearly 40 years ago," she said. "There is no electricity, no running water, no road access, but the title is clean. The back taxes and transfer fee come to exactly $12. Jessica placed the crumpled $12 on the desk. Mrs. Peterson looked at the money, then at Jessica. "Are you sure, child?" "It's all I have," Jessica said. The woman's eyes softened. She nodded slowly and pushed the papers forward. Jessica signed her name where she was told. Her hand trembled slightly. When she finished, Mrs. Peterson closed the folder and slid something heavy across the desk. an old iron key, dark with age, cold in her palm. Your grandmother kept this key for 50 years, the lawyer said. She always said you would come for it. Jessica turned the key over in her fingers. Outside the window, the mountains stood silent and endless. The directions were simple. Follow the county road for 3 miles. Turn onto a dirt path, called Moose Creek Trail, then walk the rest of the way. It took Jessica nearly 2 hours to find the place. The dirt path was barely visible, just 2 faint tracks, cutting through tall grass and pine needles. The deeper she walked into the forest, the quieter everything became. No cars, no voices, just the wind and the occasional call of a bird. Her backpack grew heavier with every step. More than once she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. $12 might not seem like much, but when it was almost half of everything you owned, it mattered. Finally, the path faded completely into the trees. Jessica pushed through a thicket of ferns and stepped into a small clearing. And there it was, a stone house, small, old, covered in moss and ivy. The roof had collapsed in one corner. The wooden door hung crookedly on its hinges. Weeds had grown up to the window sills, but the walls were still standing, thick stone walls that had weathered decades of snow and wind. Jessica stood there for a long moment, just staring. Well, she whispered to herself, this is it. She walked slowly around the building. The place looked like it had been forgotten for a generation, but something about it felt different from what she had expected. It didn't feel angry or haunted. It just felt tired. Waiting. At the front, the crooked door was held shut by an old iron lock. Jessica pulled the key from her pocket and slid it into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. The metal resisted. She twisted harder. Then, with a loud click, the lock opened. She pushed the door. It groaned open, scraping against the stone floor. Cold, still air spilled out from the darkness inside. The interior was dim and dusty. A single beam of late afternoon sunlight slipped through a broken window, lighting up the floating dust. Jessica stepped inside. Her footsteps echoed on the old floorboards. There was not much to see. A broken chair, a rusted stove, a wooden table covered in leaves that had fallen through the roof. But against the far wall, half hidden in shadow, stood an old wooden chest. It was small, plain, bound with iron straps. Jessica walked toward it slowly and knelt down. The chest wasn't locked. She lifted the heavy lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded wool blanket, were 3 things. First, a stack of letters, tied with a red ribbon. Second, a leather journal. And third, a small cloth bag that clinked when she picked it up. She opened the bag first. Inside were coins, old silver coins, not a fortune, but enough. Enough to fix the roof, enough to buy supplies, enough to survive the first winter. Her hands began to shake. She set the bag aside and picked up the journal. On the first page, in careful handwriting, was a letter addressed to her. My dearest Jessica, if you are reading this, then you made it to 18, and you are brave enough to come find this place. I am so proud of you. You probably think the coins are the gift. They are not. The coins are just a tool. The real gift is this house, these stone walls, this piece of ground. People will tell you this place is worthless. Let them. Because you and I know the truth. Worth is not what something looks like from the outside. Worth is what you build with it. I did not leave you this house to make you rich. I left it to give you a place to stand, a place to grow, a place to become whoever you are meant to be. The rest is up to you. With all my love, Grandmother Eleanor. Jessica read the letter twice, then a third time. Her eyes filled with tears. She wiped them with her sleeve and took a slow, shaky breath. For years, she had felt like nothing, like someone the world had forgotten. But here, in this crumbling stone house in the middle of nowhere, a woman she barely remembered had reached across time and said, "You matter, you." That night, Jessica slept on the floor of the stone house. She had no sleeping bag, no heater, just her thin jacket and a small blanket. She gathered dry leaves and old rags to cushion the cold floor. Then she lay there in the darkness, listening. The forest was alive with sounds, wind in the pines, branches creaking. Somewhere far away, a stream flowed over rocks. It was not a frightening silence. It was a peaceful one. For the first time in her life, Jessica felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, she woke with the sun. A beam of golden light fell across her face. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from the cold floor, but her heart strangely warm. She had work to do. The first thing she did was walk back to town. She found the hardware store and met its owner, a quiet man named George. He had lived in the valley for 60 years. When Jessica told him about the stone house, he didn't laugh. He just nodded and said, "That house has been waiting for someone like you for a long time." He helped her choose the tools she needed: a hammer, a saw, nails, a tarp for the roof. She paid with some of the silver coins from the chest. George didn't ask where they came from. He just put them in his drawer and wished her luck. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Jessica's life. She learned to mix mortar and repoint the old stone walls. She learned to patch a roof and hang a door. She learned to clear weeds and dig a small garden. Her hands blistered and calloused. Her back ached every night. But every morning, she woke up and kept going. Slowly, the house began to change. The roof stopped leaking. The door hung straight. A small stove was installed in the corner. The first time she lit a fire, Jessica sat in front of it for an hour, just watching the flames. The warmth spread through the room, and for the first time, the stone house felt like a home. Word spread through the small town. People began to leave things at the end of the dirt path: a bag of potatoes, a jar of honey, an old blanket, a note that said, "Welcome to the valley." One afternoon, a woman named Margaret came up the path carrying a basket of bread. She was old and walked with a cane. She stood in the doorway of the stone house and looked around with tears in her eyes. "I knew your grandmother," Margaret said. "She was my best friend. She used to sit right there by the window and dream about you. She said you would come one day, and here you are." That evening, Jessica opened the letter journal again. She flipped past the letter to the later pages. Her grandmother had filled them with sketches and plans, drawings of shelves and beds, and a garden in the yard, notes about which stones to fix first, little reminders like, "The sun hits the kitchen window at noon, and the well is behind the big pine." It was not just a house her grandmother had left her. It was a road map. By autumn, the stone house was almost unrecognizable. The walls were solid. The roof was tight. A small chimney sent a thin ribbon of smoke into the crisp mountain air. A garden had been planted by the eastern wall, and on the porch there were 2 wooden chairs that Jessica had built with her own hands. She often sat there in the evening, watching the sun set behind the pines. She thought about her grandmother, about the life Eleanor must have lived, about why she had kept this secret for so long. One night, she found the answer. In the back of the journal, on the very last page, her grandmother had written, "A house is not a home because of what it has. A house becomes a home because of what you put into it. Your sweat, your tears, your hope. I am giving you these stones, Jessica, but you must give them your heart." Jessica closed the journal and looked out at the darkening forest. She understood now. The silver coins were not the gift. The house was not even the gift. The gift was the chance to build something herself, with her own hands, her own choices, her own strength. She had come here with nothing. No money, no family, no future. But she had found something that no one could ever take away. She had found herself. If someone had asked Jessica a year ago what her future looked like, she would have had no answer. But now, sitting on the porch of the stone house, watching the first snow fall gently over the valley, she knew the future was not something that happened to her. It was something she built, one stone at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. And that is the real story, not the money, not the house, but the girl who turned a forgotten ruin into a life. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, your beginning does not define your ending. Good night or good morning. Wherever you are, we are glad you are here.